Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Friday, April the 17th, 2015, and this is WX Live webinar number 146. Today we're featuring Hyperfile SQL 101 with Jeff Graham. So it's all yours, Jeff.
Good morning, everyone. We're going to start off with a very simple query, as you see on the screen there. It's three tables that are linked through a common primary key of name RN. And I have the first query test up here on the screen, and you can see that there's 12,850 records. Now, and there's no zip code. So if we want to add the zip code, we go to query description, and the zip code is in addresses. You just take the zip code field, add it to the list, and then move it to the position you want, which we'll put it right after the state code. All right. Now, one other thing that will add the zip code in. We'll see it on the next one. But there, if you look at the joins, this is where you specify outer, inner, outer joins. So we want to include the names that have no contacts. Okay. Now that immediately changes the query, and you'll see this join is just on the contacts, and this is on the addresses. So if we run the query now, you'll see that there's now 16,759, a few more. And if we want to get all names, then we include it run the query test. We're getting the same amount. Let's look at the SQL code for this now. Okay, we've got the left outer join and another outer join on addresses. So I think what I didn't do is I didn't save it. Query test. We're getting the same number. Interesting. Anyway, that's how you modify the joins to make it, change it to an outer join. Now, if I want to find out what names are not linked to contacts, then I can say that select that if the address is missing, or if the contact is missing, then I want to know what fields we have. And there are no records in that case. So, but I know that there's always an address for each name. So let's remove that condition. And run it again. Now we have 3,000 names which have no contacts. Close. So anyway, that's a simple example of how you end up with outer joins, or if you want to get those that are not related, how to do it. So let's look at a one other example. If there are any questions, please note so, and Tim can relay them to me. So.
Yep, no questions so far, Jeff.
Actually, I want to go and look at this. Here is a another example of a inner join and an outer join together. And if we look at the joins here, it's just simply checking the box to include the extra ones. And there's none here. So, and then by testing, you know whether it's picking up the right data or not. And then you can always look at the SQL generated. I clicked on the wrong one there, to know what it's generating. And it's interesting, when I was loading these applications for 19, moving them over and opening in 20, it came up and told me a couple of times that the query was generated in a previous version and the syntax is incorrect, so it was modifying the syntax of the SQL. I don't really have the details on it, but there have been changes in release 20 in the hyperfile query editing, and I think it is going to be an improvement. So now here's an example that is going to be a little more different. I just wrote this little quick program or project this week, and I was trying to find data that I knew nothing about, and it's all in SQL Server. And the one here on the right is what worked and finally gave me the data I wanted.
Hey, Jeff.
Yes?
We do have a question. It's
okay.
From Dan Mattis. He asks, is the inner join the join on the left?
On the previous one?
Yeah, it would have been on the previous one. Is the inner join the join on the left? Because these questions could be delayed by 30 seconds or more.
Yeah. This is the inner join, I believe, because it has no check marks that would cause it to create a outer join. So if we look at the SQL, the inner join is custom order line. So that is the join on the left. And the left outer join is this here. Does that answer the question? I hope.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go back to this other example. And anyway, I had a problem installing one of my updates on Windows 7, and it wiped out this on the right. So I went to the backups and loaded it in, and it came back in as a previous version of where I was experimenting, trying to find what I needed. And if we look at the query description here, the one thing I was trying to get was the invoice ID, and that needed a different table because the invoice ID is in the cash receipt line and not the distribution. This is what I was trying to pick up. So as soon as I came over here and edited this backup file and added in the cash receipt line invoice number and saved it, this is what happened. It generated all this extra joins. because there are no unique keys in these tables that it can find to make the join. The keys are two fields, and you have to relate the two fields. So to get it to come out right, I had to delete these and manually add in the joins like this, and then that solved the problems. Now when you have two joins on the same tables, it lumps them together, but you have to delete and add them, and I would recommend saving after you put like this and this in, save it, and then come in and add the other two, or sometimes it messes up and goes back to trying to create the join itself. So anyway, that's just a heads up on what can happen. Now, let's look. I'm looking at. Okay, let's look at the two query example. Okay, where's the other query? Hold on just a second. I want query service days by meal type. All right, this is our first query. And what this is doing is simply going through our transaction table and determining which days there was at least one transaction on. Now there's tons of transactions on every day, so by selecting the delete duplicates, it ends up with only one record for each transaction date and meal type combination. So if we run this for a given range, then you'll see it comes out with only one date for each meal type, breakfast and lunch. Now on our but what we want to know is we want to know how many service days occurred in a given time period for each meal type. So we put in a query on a query. So we're selecting the query service days by meal type and then counting the number of transaction days in that selection. And if we run this query for the same date range, we see that there was 19 service days for breakfast and 19 for lunch. That's normal because they usually have breakfast and lunch, but there are some time periods where they will not have a lunch because they release school early or some other reason. Okay, so that's a query using a query. Any questions about that?
No questions so far.
Okay, so yeah, I was going to next show that. Okay, now here's a very simple query. And if you want to modify the SQL code, it certainly allows you to do that. And say we want to put additional condition on here. And let's go back to the run this query test. And you see that there's multiple addresses for given names. So by definition in this data structure, then there's a field in the addresses that tells what type of address it is. So we want to change this SQL code. Now, as soon as you try to change your SQL code, it comes up with a dialog to say, do you want to save it before it's modified? And if you say save, then it picks a name and we'll overwrite it. So now you can modify it and say, and add addresses dot sn equal 1 and save that, and then we go back and run the query test. Now it changes the looks, but we run the query test and we only have one address for each name. Now the interesting thing is that you also can reverse engineer it, and you look at the query description and it put in that additional parameter. Very nice feature. So yeah, I wanted to show a couple of things about using queries. And I'll get back to this in a minute. So now our little test screen. Now this is using that same query we just right, I think it's using the same query we just used. And we can go in here and you can see I've done some testing and I modified something here. And this table is based on a query. So if we refresh the table, now it depends on the way you do the execute query, whether you can modify the file or not. In this case, I have not. So by the default, and we see that the modified came back on that name. Now, if I check this box, then it'll cause it to execute the query with a modification. I know this is probably old hat to everyone listening, but it's in case someone not aware of it, it's thought I would cover this part. Well, I'm going to do a go. Now if we come in here and remove this modified and refresh the table, and we go through then the modified's gone. So it retains the modifications if you open it with HModify file. And we do this a lot. It used to be that you could only do HModify on a query if it was a single table, if I remember correctly. But now you can do it even though this has two tables involved. Of course, this one you couldn't because it's this is actually a linked file. So now you can sort things, and let's look at the sort code. Go back over here. And okay. There's how you sort the table by multiple columns. And if we go to our, I'll come down here and stop. So we're going to sort the name descending and the address ascending and do a sort. Now you see that this sort field is minus the column name, and this sort field was just the column name. And if we do a go, then we will see that it has sorted the name descending and the address field ascending. But I don't think we have multiple in here. So, and if you want to do just the address descending, then it'll be down here. This is the sort that's used. Now, if you have a blank in the sort, like here, it will give an error saying that you can't have a blank in the column. So that's why the if statement's there. And now it's sorted the address descending. You notice it's case sensitive in this case because the field is case sensitive. So anyway, that's sorting, and that's query with data modification. And now let's look at an example that is makes queries really nice, in my opinion. Now this is a generalized search that on many different fields. In the name keys field, that this is a table generated from names of contacts and names of companies, because in this system they allow them to change the ID of someone. So you may have picked up a you knew the company name, but their name has changed. So you can actually search in this field and say, I know the ID used to be whatever, and find it. And then all the kind of different fields that you can search on. These are in the address table. These are in the name table. And these are all in the names table. And their customer status. So, excuse my hoarseness. It's my asthma medication. Now, if we look at the query that goes with this, here is the query. And this is a fairly long query with a lot of different parameters. But what I just added for this demonstration is this OR condition here. And the way I did that is go back over here, and we scroll down to the bottom of this. I put OR conditions down here. So if we run this, oh, whoops. I did not run this since I have to have some map tables in here, and I don't think I have SQL Server running at the moment. So bear with me just a moment here. SQL Server MSQL. Start it. Okay. I have several different SQL Server on there, and I only start the one I'm using since I don't use it very often. Okay, and this is an MDI application. And so if we come in here and put the OR and open, so this will be any customer, active vendor that has wood in their name somewhere. And so if we search, then we get a list of 64 different names. Now their addresses, these tabs, are initialized by a procedure that calls a query that picks up the related tables and displays them as you go through the different names. So if we scroll down, you see that the appropriate names show up. And then you can actually refine this search by a search here. And let's say we only want to get the ones that are in Bend. I know there's some in Bend. So we search and we get a new window that has a selection out of this list. Now the way that works is that and it uses the same query. So let's look at the query again, and you'll see up here there is let's just look at the query description. On the names ID, there are 3 queries. Okay, one is equal to the ID, so you can put in the ID and it'll find that particular name only. And are the IDs in the list of IDs? And this is for the OR condition, because the OR was one of the fields that is included in that OR at the bottom of the search. Now, so I'll go back to in this search, I build a list out of this table of the IDs. When I call the search, pass it to this search, and then it has that parameter with those list of fields, and that causes it to search within only those fields. So we end up with refining the search that way. Then also, you can do another search, and let's do it, take the OR off, and that'll be only those that are both customer and vendor and have wood in their name. I'm not even sure we'll find anything on that, but let's see. Yes, there are 10 of them that are both customers and vendors for this company. And so we have multiple searches here that can be refined, and you can switch between them, and they and way back here. Now we have like contacts here, and we can do a search and say we want to put, I think there's probably a John in here, and there's a whole bunch of them. So if we select this one and do done, it'll locate that name and show that contact down the screen below. So it's really easy to make very generalized search capabilities using queries in the query parameters. And it's one of the key things to that is that all of the fields in the search screen are set to return null if empty.
Hey,
So
Jeff,
yes?
we have a question here from Dan.
Okay.
It says, where/how do you do the OR?
Okay. Let's look at the code for the search screen. That's not it. That's the, here we go. Search code. Okay, so, no, wait a minute. That's not. Code. Oh, it is. Okay. Like I say, I just assign most of the fields. I just assign the parameters to from the value of the field, and that'll be null if there's nothing in the field. So now down at the end, for the OR fields, that I say if okay, this is the checkbox. If that's checked, and if the customer status is not equal to all, then I assign that pCustomer OR parameter. It's a different parameter from pCustomer status. And if we look over here, no, or the query again, and okay, query description, and you look at the selection condition, this is probably going to answer your question, existing ands and ors. So I took these last two, or the three, there's actually four, or condition ones, and put them in parentheses with ors between them, and the and with that parentheses. So this is how I accomplish the or condition in the query. And then when you go to the code, over here, you just set one or the other depending on whether you want an or condition or the standard and. I hope that answers the question. Any other questions on this generalized search?
None yet, Jeff.
Okay. Let's go look at some other features. No, we'll just go with let's close this one. Go back to here. And now, the other thing I wanted to show you is triggers. So if we look at our analysis, we have this is server-side triggers. Now, I was originally going to show the views and stored queries, and it turns out that the SQL views in our pre-release doesn't work, but the French release that came out, they do work. So once we get the next patch available, then these queries review, and maybe we'll go through that another time. But anyway, we have triggers defined here. And to have a trigger, you have to have a routine and a stored procedure to call. So let's look at this. And it simply takes, and this one is a trigger on addresses. And before the modify or a write, it takes, if there's a city, it builds a city, state, code, and zip field. Otherwise, it sets it to null. And in the case of contacts, there are several calculated fields that, I call them calculated fields because that's what it was in our previous product. But it takes a field and basically builds a concatenation of, in this case, it takes, if there's a first name, it adds the first name. If there's middle initial, that plus a dot and space between them, and then the last name. And then if there's a title, it puts comma plus the title, and so forth. So there's basically 3 fields that are updated by this trigger. So once you define a stored procedure and store these, then you add the trigger. Let's go over. We got to end this just so we can see the editing part. So if you go to the analysis and you want to define the trigger, there's 2 ways to do it. Of course, you can add a, I think there's trigger here. You can add it here, or you can right click over here and do new trigger. And that allows you to select a, well, let's just do it. Then you pick the table. First of all, you pick the trigger code. And then you specify the file that you want it to work on. I don't even remember which one I picked. Addresses. So you would put addresses over to here. And so whenever that file is modified, and you select here that I want to do, say, like add, writing, or modification, and then that'll cause the trigger to go. And I've already done that. So now if we go back and run the test again, let's take this out. And we go to test triggers. Then this is one of the fields and addresses. So if I just modify that and go to the next field, it immediately comes back because the trigger is putting it back in there. And down here, and let's say if I changed it to over here to Madras, then it immediately updates that field as well when it writes the data. Now, down here, let's expand this. The name, title, comment, and so if I change his name to Jones out here, now it didn't update here until I refresh the tables. Now it's Terry Jones. And actually I didn't figure out why it's doing it one way on one table and another way on the other table. But basically a table display will do it. But you see that the trigger is working. Okay. Any questions so far about triggers? It's very useful if you want to format address labels or have fields that you that are a combination of other fields for the ease of reporting or making labels, that kind of thing. And that's why we do it. In our school application, we allow the searching by any part of the name, and those fields are built each time we update a name in the school system. And the last thing, well, not the last thing, but the next thing I want to show is stored queries. Now let's just, this is a backup procedure, and there's the HyperFile HyperFile Client server allows you to do backups from any application. But I wrote, well, we'll watch it here. Let's take this out for the moment. And now it's showing a progress bar.
Hey, Jeff.
Yes.
We have another question. This is
Okay.
from Dan. He goes, yay, triggers and stored procedures. So actually, in the question, it was an emphatic statement.
Oh,
thank you, Dan.
Right. Yeah. And not only that, views. The views are very nice once they work in the English version. They do work in the French version. So that's this. The problem with making backups on the server, in our schools, they're using virtual servers. So if we do the backup and it's just on that virtual server, and their primary server goes, and they don't back up their primary server, then all the backups are lost when the server is lost. So we have to move the backup to an external drive. So we give them the ability to put in a drive, and this is, and if I clear this, well, it comes up here and says, oh, this must be a file accessible on the HyperFile server. Now, my server's on the same machine, so I don't have to worry about that. I just do it here. And now, if we say compress the backup, it will, these backups are being made in in this folder here, and they are in the standard HyperFile Client server backup. Now, if we want to do this, I actually call a procedure that compresses that directory and passes it to an application that I have residing on the server that moves it to this backup file. Now, let's see if we can do this. We'll do a backup one more time with the compress option on. And this is the code. So if we step through here, now here's where it's executing the backup on the server. It's actually, let's go to this. Okay, here's the back. Specifying the backup information, and I didn't actually. And here's how you pass the information to the stored procedure. It's with the HSave parameter. So you make a the name for it, and this is the value passed to it. And this is where the connection. So it's passing this parameter, this information. What's this? We should be able to come down to here. Oh, its backup's already done. So anyway, the key thing I wanted to say is here's how you pass the information to the stored procedure. And in the stored procedure, okay, it retrieves the parameters with an hload parameter. So you get the information that was passed over to the stored procedure by using the hload parameter. And then the return is you do an hsave parameter, and in the application code, you do the hload procedure to get that value. And then you return a result of sReturn. That's not going through detail of how this works, but I will certainly provide the code to anyone that's interested in it. And then the backup copy thing is it looks to see the path was passed over here. So it gets the path of where to store it on the server, and it checks to see if the application that copies the zip file, in my case, is AccMealsZip.exe. So it looks in the registry to see that it is installed. And if it is, it saves the parameter of the path and executes that zip file. So that tells it where the path is. And if it exists, then we save the parameter and in the status of pending, and I haven't gone through this code in a long time. I apologize. But it then passes back the information of whether it successfully copied it and the backup succeeded and so forth. And that's where we were seeing the messages come back that that the backup was successful. And the progress bar is done in these as well. It passes information. Oh no, the progress bar is a timer that keeps checking the status of the backup and updates the progress bar based on the percentage complete. So we could look at that. let's close this out and go to the W. Wait a minute, I'm in, yeah. Okay. Oh, no, it's in the other window. Don't have that window open. I think there. Oh yeah, okay, here's the timer. So I start a timer that, and every time it fires, it does the backup refresh, and the progress bar is updated through that process. Okay, so let's, any questions about the server-side procedures?
Don't see anything yet, Jeff.
I'm sure that's not very clear since it was, it is fairly complex, but I can always put this little test application up on, if anyone's interested, just let me know. Now, the last thing, let's show the desktop. There was a special request to know how to do silent installs. So I did figure out how to do that. And let's see if I have that open. I don't. Anyway, it's not important. It's a little simple application just with one table. And it is called Silent Install. In the installation, now it has to be an installation directory, not a self-extracting executable. So once you do that, then you just say, go to that directory, the install directory, and do install.exe/silent. And then there it is. It just appeared right here. And it runs. I don't have anything in it, but that's all it takes to do a silent install of an application. Now, I couldn't find how to do the silent install of HFSQL Client server, so I sent off a request to PCSoft, and they sent back a WebDev deployment PDF. And on page 55 of that is the process to do a silent install of client server. So I think that document is in, I'm not sure where to find it. They sent me a copy of it, and I can make that available to anyone if they would like. So I haven't tried this because my machines all have this machine has two versions, a French version and an English version of the Hyperfile Control Center. And that, so it's up to those that need it to try it. So the last thing I want to do is just give this is the new Hyperfile Control Center. I don't know if anyone's looked at it in detail, but it's kind of nice in that here's the, like if you open the schools table, for example, then it puts it in another tab, and you can detach that, and then you can do another one, I think. Oh, I know what I was doing. You could, like, for example, you can do and this allows you to save queries, but you could do a query here and then do another query of the same thing or what you want to compare and put them out side by side, which is a handy thing for trying to figure out data issues. And I believe you can get both two copies of the same table out there for display if you needed to compare, or two different tables, which is what I was doing. I think it was two different tables. But it's a nice thing. Nice new features. There's in the server part, and then there's the field. But you notice here, there's stored procedures, stored queries, triggers that are all on this server. But you notice that there are no views or materialized views. So, you know, that's why it was really confusing me. But if we look at the French version, and we look at the same information, now all of a sudden you have the materialized views and the views displayed in there. And you can open that, and there's the code, SQL code for that view. And then for the materialized views are basically just a table. So they're looked at as like any other table. So that's what we have to look forward to. And when the English version comes out, enjoy that. That's all I have for today, unless there are any other questions.
No other questions. We've had a couple people say if they were interested in getting that code. So those of you who are interested, please put a comment on the posting on the community page that I will put out there shortly. And Jeff, thank you very much. It was a great presentation. Pete or Wolfgang, do you all have anything to add?
No, I think Jeff did a great job. I haven't had a chance to play with the stuff in 20, but definitely looks like some good stuff.
Good deal.
It definitely is.
Yep. And some of the text by just the nature of these queries and everything, the text is kind of small in some places, and it might be hard to see. But the videos do improve in quality after they've been on YouTube for 24 hours or so. There's something that Google does, some magic they do to optimize them, make them a little bit better. So nobody has anything else. That's it for this week, and not sure who's going to be on tap for next week. I guess it'll be either Jeff or Andy when he gets back from a trip. But if nobody else has anything else, I'll just close the way Andy normally does. Be good or be good at it.